Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Sports Insider. I'm Dan Labbe, he's Chris Fedor, and as usual we have a packed show for you today. Joe Vardon will be joining us right off the bat to talk about LeBron and the Cavaliers, then we'll preview the Browns and Falcons. Mary Kay Cabot will join us, our Browns beat reporter. Then we're going to talk some Indians today. Hot stove underway, not so much for the Indians, but we'll talk to Paul Hoynes, our Indians beat reporter, about what the Indians may be working on here in this offseason. But as promised, first let's bring in our LeBron and Cavaliers reporter, Joe Vardon. Joe, how are you?
I'm okay this morning, guys. How are you?
Doing all right. The Cavaliers losers to the San Antonio Spurs last night. And Joe, the Spurs just continue to cause LeBron-James problems. 6 of 17, 15 points, 5 turnovers. What is it about them that he just can't quite get over the hump against them?
Well, I think that last night's performance was not quite indicative of how he always plays against the Spurs. I mean, if you check his numbers, they're not bad against them. At least they weren't in the finals when, in a year when, of course, the Spurs beat his team in 5 games, and it really wasn't close. But last night was noticeable, obviously, with the numbers that you just read. And here's the biggest bet to me: 1 free throw. Mm-hmm. He wasn't getting in there. He just, he wasn't getting to the rim like he normally does.
Joe, do you attribute that to San Antonio's defense? Do you attribute that to maybe LeBron was trying to get his teammates more involved the way that he has in the past? How do you sum that up?
Well, Chris, it's a good question, and I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, for one, as we've gone over in other posts, the Spurs do this really well. I mean, they know how to defend. They've got a scheme that works against LeBron reasonably well. Kawhi Leonard stayed in front of them. Tim Duncan's always there to help. I think it's worth pointing out Duncan is there to help in a way that the Cavs have not figured out how to help when they're on defense. But that's another discussion. But the other thing that's interesting is some superstars. I mean, Kobe comes to mind, but he's just one. I mean, most of them do it this way. When the ball's not falling early, they keep shooting and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. LeBron was 6 of 17. I mean, he scored 4 points in the second half, and he kind of reverted to trying to set up other teammates. It's a very different kind of superstar. Rather than trying to force the issue if it's not there for him early, he kind of shifted gears. I mean, if you think about his fourth quarter, he didn't score until there was like 1:10 left. He didn't shoot that many shots at all, and you can close your eyes and think of his assists, and he tried to force one into Andy after it worked a couple times, and they picked that one off. I mean, he had definitely pulled away from trying to score the ball there late.
Joe, the thought coming into this year was LeBron wouldn't have to have as much of a responsibility on offense because of Kyrie Irving, because of Kevin Love, because of some of the guys that David Griffin added to the bench. But you've broken down the numbers, bud. In wins, LeBron James is terrific. In losses, he's not as good. It still seems as if LeBron's team goes as LeBron goes. Given the talent on this roster, Joe, does that surprise you early on?
Well, it does a little bit, and you're playing an excellent role of point forward here, setting me up for that, because that is exactly what I had written about for today, which is the numbers bear this out. When LeBron plays brilliantly, when he's getting to the hole, when he's scoring the ball, and then the assists and rebounds kind of follow, the Cavs are undefeated. They just, they can't be stopped. And he had one 30-point game against Utah and they lost, but otherwise, in their 5 losses, his stats are way below the stats when they win. And so so you start to say, well, what does this mean? Does this mean that those 5 losses are LeBron's fault? He wasn't there as he is in the 5 wins, or do you pin this on these young players not playing up to, I guess what you would have thought? And as we point out, I mean, it's complicated, and it's a little bit of both. I mean, I look at Kevin Love right now. I mean, I've read a few things, on our websites and others that point out his early season struggles. And he's not in the flow, and he is not. I don't know. Like when you saw them play in the preseason, and Kevin was brilliant up until about the last game or two. I mean, he was dominant, and I think we all kind of said even out loud, like, well, this is evidence that LeBron will not have to carry the load every night scoring, because look at what he has here from Kevin. And then in this regular season, it has just not been that way. So yeah, I mean, he needs a little bit more help, and he, at least for the next month or so, probably. I mean, he does need to bring his A game to win, probably.
Of course, Joe, another story this week that was big was LeBron coming out and saying his minutes need to come down. No surprise last night, his minutes did come down a little bit. He played 34 minutes as opposed to his usual 39 or 40. But it's always been the challenge with LeBron's coaches. You can keep his minutes down for a few games, but it's tough to keep him off the floor. Can David Blatt stick with this plan to keep LeBron's minutes low?
Right. I mean, I'm going to say something like highly sophomoric and uninformed here, but it's like, you know, he didn't play as many minutes last night, and they lost by 2 points, and he only scored 15. I mean, if he had played, 39 minutes instead of 34, would those 3 points they needed to win have come? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe. Certainly the bench guys played more minutes, but they didn't give any more production. I mean, if you look at the numbers, they weren't very good at all. And so it's a hard thing. I mean, you've got the best player in the world on your team. How do you not play the guy? The other thing that I thought was interesting about what he said as far as minutes is on Saturday, before that game where they won by 109, we were asking David Blatt again about his minutes. At the time, LeBron was averaging 40 minutes a game. And, was he going to pull back? And Blatt had said, well, LeBron is telling me that he feels good, and so now's not the time to do this. And all of a sudden, they have a bad night Monday night, and the next day, LeBron comes out and says, yeah, I can't do this. My minutes need to go down. The Big Three's minutes need to go down. We need to get other people involved, and we need to be smart about it. I thought that was an incredible statement to make for a couple of reasons, indicative maybe of some other things going on. But as you guys pointed out, it was no surprise then that last night he played fewer minutes.
Joe, we have to preface all these questions with the Cavs with, it's early, but it's only 10 games, but it's only been 10 games, but what are your impressions of head coach David Blatt? Because to me, it looks like at times things are moving a little quick for this guy.
Yeah. I think, you've said, Chris, you have written some stuff about that and have talked about it on the radio, and I wrote about it on Monday for Tuesday, and I'm looking at our former colleague and friend Brian Windhurst's story right now about this on ESPN. It's a topic, and it's there. He, like the other guys, are trying to figure this thing out. Here's the thing. He's got all this experience coaching overseas, and he wants to make sure that you know that. He grew tired early of questions that suggested that he was a rookie. I think that when they won their first game in Chicago, that was his first NBA win, and he said something like, "Oh, I didn't even realize that. I've won about 700 games." And so he doesn't want to be seen as a rookie, but in this league he is. And there have been a number of things where you scratch your head. This occasional public disconnect with LeBron is one series of events. Joe Harris playing, Chris, you have the number. But whatever he played last night with Sean Marion kind of sitting there is another one. How much they were using Dellavedova that high up in the rotation before he got hurt was a head scratcher too. And So those all lead you to wonder. But at the same time, I mean, a source did tell me that David is making inroads with his team in this manner. When things don't go well the night before, and they all reconvene for film the next morning, and he comes to them with a plan, just like every coach comes to them with a plan or a synopsis of what went wrong and what you're supposed to do about it. But when he does it, the sort of the sage veterans in the room are nodding their head in approval, most notably LeBron. That when Black comes to them with, okay, this is what went wrong and this is what we're going to do to fix it, you know, LeBron is in the room agreeing, and that is huge. It's not something that you see necessarily. It's not something that you hear about or see in interviews or necessarily on the floor the next night. But that is really how this coach can build trust with LeBron and with his players. And a source tells me that that is happening. So, like everybody else, we got to give him time. We've got to give him room to let this thing work out. I mean, how many times did they try to fire Spoelstra in Miami? You know, and they won 2 titles, went to 4 finals. And you know, the Cavs will be. They'll be in the Eastern Conference Finals this year, and they'll be down 2-1, and there will be story after story about how Black's gone, and then you know they'll probably end up in the finals, and all of that will have been nonsense. So, you know, it's the cycle of a very long season. Certainly questions around him right now, but I'm on the side of let's give this thing time.
All right, Joe, thanks for the time.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Joe Vardon, our LeBron-James reporter, joining us here on Sports Insider. We're going to dial up Mary Kay Cabot and talk some Browns here shortly, but you know, you talked about it, David Blatt, first-time head coach. I know he's got a lot of games overseas, but I mean, you know, I know the NBA, it's just different. There's no sport where the professional style of the game is so different from every other style of game.
You're absolutely right, and so many people can say, well, basketball is basketball, sports are sports, but this is a tough challenge for him, and he welcomes that challenge. He has mentioned that he welcomes that challenge, but last night, late in the game, calling 3 timeouts in the span of 54 seconds, Joe Harris being in there late instead of Sean Marion. I know fans don't often want to hear this, Dan, but this is a learning process. And early on in this season, everything that is happening with the Cavs, for Blatt, for LeBron, for the Big Three, it's all about learning from mistakes, growing from those, and being different when April and May roll around.
All right, let's go ahead and talk some Browns now. We'll bring in our Browns beat reporter, Mary Kay Cabot. Mary Kay, how are you?
I'm doing great, guys. How you doing?
We're doing all right, and Josh Gordon is officially back. And Mary Kay, I'm not gonna lie, I was reading a post today that just had a bunch of Josh Gordon videos that I was watching, and you kind of forget how good this guy really is, and until you kind of go back and watch what he did last year. How much is it going to help this offense to have Gordon back?
You know, I think it will help absolutely tremendously. How many times, you know, did you look out there last year and it doesn't seem like he's open, and then before you know it, he's reaching those hands up into the air and plucking a big catch out of the air and turning it into some 40, 50-yard touchdown. So, you know, he's one of the best in the league. He's one of the best I've ever seen in my life. He just has that much raw talent and natural ability. Again, he still is green. There's a lot of upside potential for him, but he's fantastic, and it will be a huge help.
Mary Kay, when it comes to that, if one guy comes in the lineup, that means one guy has to get out of the lineup, or at least the snaps have to be limited. So who's the odd person out?
Well, you know what? I think they're going to rotate these guys in pretty well. I think they'll probably end up using more 3 wides, maybe some 4 wides, and multiple sets to be able to get all these guys on the field. And I think you'll see a rotation. So I don't know if you'll necessarily say, oh, you know what, no more Taylor Gabriel. He's not going to be out there anymore. These guys have made big plays all year long, and they've overachieved, and they've earned the right to be out there. So I think that Josh will get his reps, but I think the other guys will too.
Mary Kay, on the injury front, the Browns got some good news this week. Jabal Sheard, likely not out for the year, could play this week. Carlos Dansby, maybe not as serious as first thought. In fact, Mike Benton was asked if Dansby could maybe go this week. That's probably not likely, but I mean, this defense would have been in big trouble without those guys. How big is it that the news is good, especially for Sheard?
Well, the picture changes drastically if those two guys can get back on the field anytime soon. When we heard on Monday that it was, significant amount of time and significant injuries, possibly the year for Jabal and upwards of a month for Carlos, I thought things looked pretty bleak for a defense that was already 31st against the run and just couldn't shut anybody down in that regard. So I think it's huge, absolutely huge, that those guys are still going to have an opportunity to play. And then when you couple that with Josh Gordon being back, I think anything can still happen in this division right now.
If Dansby can't go, Mary Kay, where is it the Browns are going to miss him the most?
Well, just in general, first of all, big plays. I mean, he does make big plays. He's in the right place at the right time. He creates pressure, havoc, and that kind of stuff. But he's the quarterback of the defense. He gets everybody lined up. He's got a lot of experience in doing that. Now, Craig Robertson would replace him, but, he's a little bit of a younger guy and hasn't had much experience doing that. So just in terms of being the field general, I think they would miss him the most.
Mary Kay, of course, the big news of the week was Ben Tate, the Browns deciding to cut Tate shortly after he kind of spouted off a little bit in the locker room and then only got 2 carries against the Texans. How much of him being cut was based on performance, and how much of him being cut was trying to keep that locker room together?
You know what? I think it was probably about 50-50, in my opinion. I would have to say that playing like a Brown matters to this team. And playing like a Brown doesn't mean being disgruntled in the middle of a playoff run. And not only being disgruntled about it, but also, going public with it. Now, I've been told, him speaking up, wasn't the reason that he's gone. But I know that it had to be at least a factor that you're going to voice your displeasure with the way things are going. Not only that, but to also, kind of take some shots at the coaching staff. They didn't throw us the ball out of the backfield. I think he, in some ways, tried to talk his way off to the football team. He did not. I don't think he wanted to be here. I think he saw the writing on the wall that he was now nothing more than a third down back. That's not what he signed up for. But again, more so than anything, it was the impact that his attitude and demeanor were having on the football team, more so, I think, than him speaking out to us. But so I'd say 50% attitude and demeanor, 50% that he was getting hit behind the line of scrimmage quite a bit.
All right, Mary Kay, Atlanta Falcons this weekend. They're in first place in the terrible NFC South. They're 4-6. How good is this team?
Well, you know what? I mean, they do obviously have some talent, and they do obviously have some good, really good offensive weapons. In, Roddy White, Julio Jones, Steve Jackson. I mean, there's talent on this football team. So I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that this is going to be an easy game for the Browns. Even the ones that, you think might be easy haven't been easy for the Browns this season. But I still think that the Browns can win the game based on the emotional lift and the, touchdown/yardage lift they're going to get from Josh Gordon. And again, knowing that they are going to get some of those guys possibly back defensively, I still think that they can probably be okay this game. But you know what? If Jackson gets running downhill, you never really know how this is going to go. I mean, if Alfred Blue can put 156 up on them, you know what Mike Smith is thinking this week. So once again, he said it. I've been saying it all season long. It comes down to takeaways. If the Browns can take the ball away and get a couple of interceptions or punch it out and get a fumble recovery, that's what they have lived. That's what they've lived off of this year. They have to get those, in my opinion, to win football games, or at least they have had to do that without Josh Gordon in the lineup. So it will come down to that.
Not just Alfred Blue, but Lorenzo Taliaferro, Denard Robinson. You
going.
plug somebody in there. They've had big games. Mary Kay, the Browns have these 2 road games, Atlanta, Buffalo, and then they've got to come home and they have to play a very good Indianapolis team. Are these 2 games, are we to the point where these 2 games are must-wins for this team?
I would say that this one is, because if you lose this one to slip to 6-5, the rest of the AFC North is they're starting to string some wins together. Obviously, Pittsburgh and the Bengals are ahead of the Browns right now. So yeah, I think that you would be in dire straits if you slip to 6-5 right now, knowing that after that you still have 3 games on the road and that your home games are very, very difficult. This is one that you have to get, and it's a team they should be able to beat.
Mary Kay, speaking of the Indianapolis Colts, they'll have a new special teams player for that game. Josh Cribbs, former Brown, going to Indianapolis. It was clear the Browns had some kind of issue on special teams, obviously, but it was also pretty clear, Mary Kay, that they didn't have an interest in Josh. Why do you think that is?
You know what? I don't know for sure why that is, but I will say that I think they should have signed him. I think he would have I think he would have been so hungry. I think he would have been so fired up. I think he would have brought the same intensity and passion and sort of hometown vibe to the special teams that Dante Whitner has provided for the defense, that Brian Hoyer has provided for the offense. I think he would have provided a huge, huge emotional lift, and I think it was a mistake for them not to sign him. I think he would have given them something in the return game, and I think he would have given them a ton off the field.
All right, Mary Kay Cabot, our Browns beat reporter, joining us. Browns play the Falcons on Sunday at 1 o'clock. Mary Kay, thanks for the time.
Thank you, guys.
Josh Cribbs, would you have signed him?
No, I wouldn't have. And I understand where Mary Kay is coming from. It's clear the Browns have an issue on special teams. Any kind of boost, Dan, would have been terrific. And she makes a good point about how hungry he is. He wanted to get back into the NFL. He plays really, really hard. His attitude can be infectious. But I think you're running into the same kind of situation that you ran into with Ben Tate. Behind Josh Cribbs was always, to me, a guy who looked out for Josh Cribbs.
Yeah.
And yes, he fought so hard, and he was a special teams guy, and he did whatever it took to help the team win. But so much of it was about Josh Cribbs, too. My contract, my role. I want to be a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Why am I not playing more wide receiver? And it's got to be about the team. And I just never got the sense when Josh was here that he was the ultimate team guy.
I think you're right on that. But that being said, I think if you are legitimately in a playoff push and you look at Josh Cribbs and you think he can help you get better, you think he can help that return game, because they've gotten nothing out of their return game this season, I think you take that risk. Now, maybe the Browns looked at Josh Cribbs and said, he can't help us.
Maybe.
He's done. But I think with all of that, if you can't get however many games out of Josh Cribbs to help your offense, help you get better field position in both the kick return game and the punt return game, I think that's a chance you take.
The Browns, I think, Dan, are in an interesting spot because they want to win. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
They do want to get to the playoffs. But I think it also matters to them the way that they have built this thing and trying to hold guys accountable. I think it matters as much to the Browns who they win with.
Yeah.
And they showed that with the Ben Tate release. They said, okay, man, you're going to spout off. You're going to complain about your role. You're going to be unhappy about your carries. We'll find somebody else because nobody is bigger than this team. And I think, again, that's one of the things that I think the Browns look into with every signing that they make or every trade that they want to make too, is who are you as a person? It's one of the reasons why I think the Browns stayed away from Percy Harvin.
Yeah, I think you're right on that front. And it reminds me a little bit, and now this guy didn't have the success on the field, but it reminds me a little bit of when Eric Mangini first got here. And you remember he jettisoned Braylon Edwards, jettisoned Kellen Winslow. And at the time, those were guys that had those big years in 2007, and Browns fans loved those guys. They saw them as legitimate weapons. Now, we saw how their careers went after they left Cleveland. But, it's a similar situation here where, the Browns are trying to get that locker room right where they want it. All right, let's go ahead and talk some Indians baseball. Our Indians beat writer Paul Hoynes is joining us here on Sports Insider. Hoynesy, welcome aboard.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Things are relatively quiet for the Indians on the hot stove right now. The big thing is some talk of maybe them looking to move Nick Swisher. Is that even possible?
I heard that, and I just had a laugh. I mean, I don't see how you're able to trade him. I really don't. The guy's got 2 bad knees. He had a terrible year, and he's making $30 million over the next 2 years. I mean, even if you do one bad contract for another bad contract, you're going to have to do some looking to find a contract like that. I mean, I think they're studying all their options, and if Chris Antonetti is able to move him, that's got to be the trade of the year right there.
Give him executive of the year just for that one trade,
Exactly.
Hoynesy. My goodness.
That's exactly right.
But from the Indians' standpoint, Hoynesy, even if it is taking on another bad contract, and that's what they would have to do in this kind of move, does it make sense just to free up that DH spot so that they can have some options? DH is a huge position for the Indians, and you got a guy who can't help you there.
Yeah, I don't know if they just how much money they can free up, because you're going to have to absorb a lot of the contract no matter what. I would think. I guess, well, maybe if it's a bad deal for bad deal, the money's even. But still, you're still taking money on, and you're probably going to have to eat some of the contract. So I just don't know how much freedom it gives you. I mean, especially this year. Maybe in 2016 there would be some relief, but right now I don't think there's much of an upside here.
Is there anything, if the Indians are unable to move Swisher, is there any chance that he can actually help this team on the field? Or is it just, I mean, like you mentioned, the 2 bad knees, what we've seen the last couple of years, is it about done for Nick Swisher?
Well, I think if they could get him back to where he was in 2013, I think he could help. I still think he could help them. If he could, stay on the field for 140 games, and hit, 10 to 15 home runs, drive in 60 runs, I think that would help. But, the question is, can he do it, and where is he going to do it, at what position? I know talking to Chris Antonetti in spring training, they were talking about moving him, maybe trying him in the outfield because they thought that would be less strain on his knees, in right field or left field.
Wait, I'm kind of confused. How is it less strain on his knees to play the outfield as opposed to DH, Hoynesy?
Well, that's what I asked. but they said there's more. At first base, you're spending, there's stretching, there's a lot of up and downs, there's a lot more sudden movements in right field and left field. There would be less abrupt starts, less plays where you're starting and stopping suddenly, that kind of thing. At least that's what they're saying.
Whoa. Well, that sounds like a GM just reaching for whatever they can reach for at that point.
If you guys remember, just before Swisher got hurt for good, when he went on the DL in August, he had made 4 starts in the outfield.
Yeah.
So they were already experimenting with that.
Hoynesy, a couple off seasons ago with the Swisher contract, the Bourne contract, the Indians got a lot of credit for going out and spending money. It was well deserved. The contracts have obviously not worked out. Swisher, who knows? Bourne just beat up last year, couldn't stay on the field. When he was on the field, he did have a little bit of an impact from that leadoff spot. But do those 2 contracts kind of spoil the Indians when it comes to free agency? Are they going to be a little more gun shy if they have an opportunity to spend some money?
That's a great question, and I think to a certain degree, yes. I mean, it definitely hamstrings them. It kind of handcuffs them right now in terms of spending money. Down the road, would they take another shot? I don't know. I mean, you were signing a speed guy in Bourne that had turned 30, and the evidence on speed guys is when they turn 30 or 32, they stop running. The speed leaves. And we've seen that with Bourne. And with Swisher, that's just, if you look at his, like the 6-7 previous years before they signed him, he was like a rock. He was out there every day. His production was steady, and it just looked like he got old real fast here. And I think, multi-year deals, it's been proven that, players, when they get that multi-year deal, I don't know if Swisher could, obviously he couldn't have played through 2 bad knees, but I think sometimes, players when they're going year to year, when they're entering their free agent year, they're pushing themselves a little harder. And then when you get that security, you take your foot off the pedal, I think, a little bit. And that's only natural.
Hoynes, being around this team this offseason, what do you think it is they want to accomplish?
I think they're looking to add, just from talking to them, I think they're looking to add maybe a cornerback, a guy that's obviously not going to play every day, not a high-impact guy, like a second-tier free agent, a guy that could maybe protect them in right field if Swisher and Rayburn can't come back or have some trouble coming back, and protect them at DH and first base if Swisher doesn't, Swisher is slow to recover. I think that's what they're looking at. They're looking at a hitter, and I think if anything big happens, I think that they'll try to do trade-wise. They'll try to make a deal. They talked to John Hart before he traded Haywood and to St. Louis, and I've got to think they were talking about him, and maybe they trade. So I don't know. Maybe the Indians didn't want to let go of that some of their young starters, and a setup guy like St. Louis did. So I've got to think that deal was on the table for the Indians, that they probably kicked the tires on that, and maybe didn't want to give up a guy like I'm just throwing a name out there, Salazar, something like that.
Yeah.
All right, Hoynes, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, Chris, I'm going to say, when I used to play intramural softball or whatever, we'd always put somebody in right field that we didn't want to see the ball a lot. I don't know if that's
right.
Maybe what the Indians are thinking with Nick Swisher, but yeah, that's interesting.
That is so Little League, isn't it? Like, hey, Billy, just go out there, and then you can pick flowers.
No, you're a right fielder. You're fine.
You're fine.
Yeah,
just stand there, stare at the grass.
You're our best right fielder, Billy. Just keep at it. All right, that'll do it for Sports Insider. For Chris Fedor, I'm Dan Labbe. Thanks for watching.